Okay, so thank you for joining us this evening. We have a very special webinar. This is for the online MBA program with EGADE Business School. My name is Morgan McHenry and I'm the admissions manager for the online MBA program. And I have two very special guests with me this evening that I'm excited to introduce you to. First of all, if you're not very familiar yet with the online MBA program and with EGADE Business School, the MBA program is the #1 MBA program in Latin America, and EGADE Business School is the #1 ranked business school. So this program has a Triple Crown accreditation, and part of what that means is only 1% of business schools worldwide have this accreditation. It's a global accreditation and it's going to ensure the quality of your education. One of the stipulations of a Triple Crown accreditation is there's actually needs to be a mix on the faculty between PhD holders and hands-on business experience. And we have a real live representation of that this evening with the two faculty members that we have joining us. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started with the introductions. So first of all, we have Professor Elliot. As you can see, Elliot is a values-driven leadership researcher, former postdoctoral research associate at Princeton, on-site and online professor at Tec de Monterrey. He has also co-authored a number of articles, including Boosting State Humility via Gratitude, Self-Affirmation and Awe, Theoretical and Empirical Perspectives, and an Upward Spiral Between Gratitude and Humility. In 2011, he received the award for Best Article from the Department of Organizational Behavior, Academy of Management of San Antonio. So Elliot, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for having me.
Great. Our other faculty member that we have with us this evening is our faculty member, Fernando. Fernando is the Global Marketing Communications Project Manager for Sumitomo Heavy Industries and an on-site and online professor at Tecnológico de Monterrey. He has experience leading and coaching high-performance teams and has participated as a journalist in media publications and as a speaker in the Americas, Asia, and Europe. He has over 18 years of experience in the B2B and B2C sectors and has managed successful teams in more than 20 countries across the globe. So Fernando, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Yeah, thanks to you, Morgan. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic. So what we're going to be talking about this evening and where our faculty members are going to be sharing their expertise is ultimately related to the online MBA program at EGADE Business School. So just a little bit of background if you're not familiar with the program. We do have 11 core courses, and then we also have a concentration in digital transformation, which is part of what sets apart the online MBA program from what we're delivering on campus. We do also have a flexible immersion, which allows our online students to come to the campus in Monterrey and interact with all of the other EGADE students. So within the digital transformation, we're going to touch on this a little bit today in terms of the innovation management, business analytics, and specifically how all of the curriculum for this program ties into individuals with an engineering background. So the first topic that we're going to dive into is how can engineers specifically benefit from earning an MBA in order to advance their careers? So Elliot, I would love if you can go ahead and kick us off with your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. So, okay, I think that there are at least 3 broad reasons why, in my opinion. I'm sure there's many more, but there's 3 that I'll focus on. The first one is arguably the most boring, so I'll start with that and I'll go to more interesting stuff from there. But the first one is this idea that these are skills or even an experience you need to have to advance your career, right? That there's something you need to do if you want to continue on, or if you want to pursue management opportunities or things along those lines. I think that's interesting and it's important, but ultimately it's not necessarily the most compelling of the reasons, right? The reason why we would want to do an MBA. It's a reason why one perhaps should do one, but it's not the most gripping. However, I do think that there's something to be said there, just before I move on, because an MBA does give you a breadth of skills, which I think you can apply to many different things, which is often forgotten. Even if you don't want to go into, you don't want to work your way up to a higher management position, but you want to start your own company or anything along those lines. There's many different other growth opportunities that you acquire through these. But that's the most pragmatic of it, which is why I start with that. The other two, one is this idea that the skills you acquire give you something like a competitive edge. And speaking specifically, so as a person with a background in psychology and as a leadership expert, I'll be focusing more on what you might call the soft skills. That is to say, the social and emotional skills that you will learn at Tech. Those are in many ways my forte, right? My area of strength. So a lot of engineers already have a wide variety of technical skills, right? That's what they're naturally good at. That's what they often are very interested in. That's what they want to develop. But what that means then is that the people you're competing with for jobs and for promotions are very strong in that. And of course, you need to be good at that as well. But if you want to have an edge on them, you can't just simply have one more technical skill, because after a while, it's like diminishing returns. It ceases to be as effective or as much of an edge as you would think. So you need to be to truly compete, you need to find things that they aren't necessarily also broadly skilled at, right? To have your unique angle. And that would be oftentimes things like the leadership skills, the social skills, the emotional skills. Those are things that they might not have developed as well. So that gives you a unique angle, a unique edge. Another one, and it's kind of building on that as well, this idea of these soft skills, things like communication, presentation, problem solving, like emotional problem solving, things like that. It's not like, I think people often make the mistake of thinking it as either, there's these technical hard skills and then there's the soft skills, when in reality, they're really closely connected, right? You need both to do the other. And I think that, just to speak to people's experiences, I'm sure everyone has had that experience where they've been on a team with someone who didn't know how to communicate, right? Or someone that was even actively frustrating to communicate with. And we've all had that experience at jobs, and it's miserable, frankly, and often very counterproductive. It's very hard to work with people who lack those skills, or even at times are actively kind of antagonistic to that kind of thing. So you already know, anyone listening already knows that someone can be an absolute genius, but if they can't communicate that genius, or they don't know how to work well in a team, then that genius becomes almost useless, right? It's just the value of it is dramatically diminished. So that means that social and emotional skills are very critical in that way, and especially they are skills like any others. There's ones you can get better at. And as an example of this, before I pass the baton. In my class on negotiation, let's just focusing on the component of negotiation in my class on leadership. A major aspect of that is not just arguing about money, although you do discuss money and how to argue or how to ask for a raise or things like that. But more importantly, it's about how you can communicate what you want and then get that thing, regardless of the context. So it's a very broadly useful skill in that perspective. So that would be 3 major reasons why I think that this would be beneficial.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing your expertise on that. And Fernando, I do want to pass it over to you to hear your perspective on how engineers can really benefit from earning an MBA to advance their careers.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. In addition, what Elliot mentioned, I just want to include that, well, in my case, I'm an engineer. I'm an engineer and I studied an MBA. And it changed completely my scope and the way that I establish all the, I would say, projects or even the experiences that I want to communicate. So I would say one of the main skills to consider in this aspect is the communication aspect and how to be effective. And for sure, I will say the empathy, because sometimes as engineer, we are kind of, I will say, jealous, or we suppose that we have the entire truth, but for sure that's not a truth. That's not a fact. And when you have the opportunity to understand and analyze the complete business ecosystem, it is much easy to establish that kind of communication with other departments, no matter in what department you are working, or even if you are the owner of a business and you are going to provide some services or something in particular. So I will say that it's a great asset to study this kind of MBA, and in an online platform for sure is amazing, because you have the opportunity not just to study in your own pace, but also to have the opportunity to know people from everywhere. So I will say that this kind of experience could be very, very productive for the ones that are going to take it.
That's fantastic. And that's a great point. You know, both of you were talking about the importance of communication and how you can have the best ideas, the best engineering ideas, but if you're unable to communicate that, there's a break in the chain and being able to be effective and move forward with what you're looking to do. And Fernando, your point to increasing the communication through the online platform, you know, most of our students it's designed so you're still working full time and immediately implementing what you're doing into your work. So the types of classmates, you know, that our students have, and I'm sure you both can speak to this a little bit later, is from every industry. So whatever industry you're an engineer in, you're going to hear a different perspective, which is particularly interesting. Great.
That's right.
So with our next question, we're looking at, you know, how specifically can engineers leverage their technical skills in the business world? So Fernando, I would love if you can speak from your experience a bit on this question.
Yeah, for sure. Well, at the end of the day, you know, it's great to use and optimize the time. And that means that when you have the opportunity to work in a global environment, you will have the opportunity not just to apply the toolkit that you will learn in the business school, but also to try or to prove, because this is, of course, is case by case. And it is very important to consider that not all the techniques are going to be used. So I will say that the main value in this kind of program is how to apply, not just to understand theoretical concepts. And that's why that I love this asynchronous and synchronous part of the program, because you will have the opportunity to concentrate in the experience of the communication in the live sessions, and you know, you will have as reference all the, I will say, asynchronous content, and that will provide you the opportunity to reflect and analyze in a deep manner. So I will say that's something important to consider. But also, in the other hand, I saw in my experience with many colleagues that are very smart people, and as Elliot mentioned, sometimes they are not effective in the way that they communicate the projects that they want to sell. And it costs money to the companies. So that's why it is very important to be sure that this kind of projects or even programs that are going to sell to a boss, to colleagues, or even to customers needs to be, you know, effective. And that's why I would recommend that study these kind of programs.
Fantastic. And you did bring up a point there, Fernando, in terms of the synchronous and asynchronous. So if anybody's not familiar with how that particularly works with our program, there are 4 hours total of live class sessions a week. You know, students have 2 classes that they take at a time. Each live class session is 90 minutes. So everything else is on your own time. And with the online MBA program, we professionally film our faculty members for the asynchronous content. So you may be watching videos on your own time that are our faculty members going in depth, explaining concepts. So that is what helps you to be prepared on the topics. So when you come into the live class sessions with our faculty members, you're then having a discussion. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the online format in a bit, but it's not just our faculty members speaking at you. They're having a discussion with you, really developing into these topics. Yeah. Fantastic. Elliot, is there anything you wanted to add to this topic before we add to the next question? I know we're hitting on your expertise in just a second.
Yeah. Well, not much. I mean, I think Fernando did a great job explaining that. I think if there's anything, because I'm not an engineer, right? I come from a different background, but I have worked with them and observed when people go from highly technical professions into management or into business. It's interesting because, as an example, I know a lot of physicists who went into finance and then made quite a lot of money at that because they had a technical set of skills that many people in finance at the time didn't have, right? Programming and mathematics and things like that. And it's a lot of the exact same technical toolkit that engineers get. So it's almost like, if anything, engineers are equipped with a whole set of power tools that at times are frankly more than you might need at times for business analytics. But having that whole set of tools is tremendously useful because it is an edge. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for your addition to that. And now we're hitting more a little bit on your expertise with the psychology side of the house of why is it important for business leaders to understand the psychology of business? So Elliot, if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. Okay, so I think that, let me paint a picture. Let's imagine a scenario for a bit. Imagine, like I'm speaking, if you, as an engineer, as a person who, like, with an engineering background, you spend a lot of time troubleshooting problems, troubleshooting systems, designing systems conceptually. Now imagine you're trying to troubleshoot a problem in a system without understanding how that system works, right? What do you do in that situation, right? Well, for one thing, you probably do a lot of trial and error. You just try a lot of different things and hope one of those things works. Or, I mean, you might like bang on the machine, hope that fixes it, right? Like, but it's a very crude and a very basic way of solving the problem. And you probably, I mean, you've like maybe you solve it, right? Maybe that actually does it. But oftentimes, I think you've seen what happens. People who don't have those technical skills try to fix a system like that without understanding it. Sometimes it blows up in their face, literally, right? So really, to truly solve a problem, you need to understand how the system works. I think that's something many engineers agree with. So then, I guess the question is, how can you solve problems with your team without understanding how teams work, right? How can you get the most out of your team members without understanding how people work, right? It's like trying to solve a physical problem without understanding physics, right? There's a system that you need to understand first. So most managers, I think, do exactly the thing that I just described. They try and solve problems without understanding people, right? Without understanding the system or the organizations, teams. So they might actually just try lots of different solutions and hope one of the things fixes the problem. And you've all seen managers like that, right? It's like every other week there's a new thing they try and hope things get better. And that's really frustrating to deal with because then you have new rules every week and it's hard to be productive. It's a very difficult environment to be in. Or sometimes there's the psychological equivalent of banging on the machine. That is to say what a lot of abusive leaders do, right? They just kind of attack or they take a very confrontational approach. And I think we agree that that's not optimal in order to get the most out of your team. So the whole point, this is all kind of getting to, and I think is perhaps obvious at this point, psychology provides you that insight into how people work into the system, and which then lets you diagnose problems and deal with them, right? And deal with the root of the problem, not just the symptoms of it. So, and not just solving problems, but it helps you get the most out of teams, help people achieve their fullest potential, help people develop into the best versions of themselves. So yeah, that's I think why it's still very relevant.
I love that analogy. That absolutely, painted a really clear picture, especially, Fernando, did you feel that hit your engineering background in terms of that explanation?
Yeah.
I think so. So fantastic. Yeah. And you can see why our faculty members are top notch just based on their answers alone.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And if you give me a chance, Morgan,
yeah.
I just want to add, very well explained by Elliot, I just want to add the part of the cultural perspective, because in different cultures, different feelings sometimes, and the manners and the way to approach. So for maybe for a Western person could be something correct, but that kind of behavior could be a problem with somebody from Asia. And even in each region, we have different customs by country. So it's something important that we need to analyze. And I live it all the time. So the way that you approach, the way that you are going to analyze the communication is not just how to communicate, but also how to react. So those kind of elements, just to complement what Elliot mentioned, I think it is important to understand that are crucial to make a deal.
That is fantastic addition. Thank you so much for bringing that up, because not only are our online MBA students in particular working in transnational organizations, but right now we have 11 different countries represented from our students in the online
Sure.
MBA program. And we have different centers across the globe for Tec de Monterrey. So there's a lot of international perspectives that people are dealing with in the day-to-day. And I think that's a very, very fantastic point to bring up. So thank you for that. So what we are going to take a look at now, I'm going to have both of you help me with the answers to this one, is we're looking at how has the evolution of technology and data shaped the need for engineers to become business leaders. So Fernando, would you like to go ahead and start us off with this one?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, we need to consider that we have new technologies all the time, and this is evolving day by day, and it is a kind of risk if you do not have the accurate information, because sometimes leaders want just to be in the mood to make an investment or something like that, and it's not chance that any organization could be at the same rhythm than technology. So that's important to understand, and for sure to analyze exactly which kind of technology could help to your company. And for sure the role of marketing, strategy, business development is crucial in this kind of, I will say, content. So for this reason, I will say that the focus that this program has in digital transformation and elements that I already mentioned, it is very important. We have a lot of different tools that we need to analyze in a, I will say, in a prospective mood to the future. For example, VR, AR. We are talking about the blockchain that is not just cryptocurrencies, but also everything that could be done in the blockchain world. There is a past field to study, so it is something important to be considered. But also we have self-driving cars. That is something that is going to happen sooner or later. So the society, especially in Latin American countries, I'm not sure that is aware about those changes that are going to happen. So in the measure that everybody could have the opportunity to learn and to analyze about this, it is more effective that the companies could react to those changes in the near future, because maybe those changes are happening right now. The testing of many of these different tools are happening right now, and how the societies are going to react, the companies. And I will say that step by step, all these kind of changes will make a disruption, not just in the business, but also in our ecosystem as persons.
That is so right, Fernando. And I mean, we train our students to be digital disruptors, and what better case than what's going on right now? A lot of these changes have been forced upon industries, and we're seeing more industries than we would have originally assumed go through rapid digital transformation. So the point you just made is particularly relevant with what we're seeing going on all across the globe right now. So Elliot, I would love to get your perspective on this as well in terms of the evolution of technology and data, how it's shaped the need for engineers to become better business leaders.
Honestly, I feel like Fernando did a great job. I'm not really sure how much more I have to contribute to that.
in terms of the psychology of change,
Yeah.
and maybe rapid change, I'm sure that's something that you deal with in terms of leadership.
Absolutely, and I think if we can go more deeply on that as well. I think so. In short, I think that we have a lot of people in power making decisions who don't understand technology, right? And I think that that's a very dangerous position to be in when people are making choices, decisions that have sweeping effects on large swaths of people, and they don't fully understand the implications of that and how the technology works or why, etc. But I think it's more than that, because it's not just how it works, but what it means for the effect on people, right? The implications for the human experience, for user experience, but more broadly for the community. And I think that requires, you can't fully think about the effects of technology and the decisions you make about technology unless you first understand that technology, right? I mean, how are you supposed to properly understand both the opportunities and dangers of blockchain if you don't understand blockchain, right? And so, and it's not just a matter of, oh, we might invest in the wrong thing, because that is very important, clearly. But the other question is like, well, what does this mean for our relationship with our customers? What does it mean for the long-term effects on communities in the market and things like that? And so that would be, I guess, my side of it is to understand the human implications of technology. You must first understand the technology, and therefore engineers should be more involved on that side.
I think that's a really great addition, because oftentimes we're thinking of digital transformation as just the digital side of things. But from a psychology side of house, it's also the adoption to change and rapid change, rapid transformation that we're seeing. You know, that's also something that leaders need to pay attention to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. So let's take a look at the next question here. Tell us about the experience of taking the program to a digital format, speaking of change, through the EGADE MBA online program. And specifically, what impact and benefits have you seen for students? So Elliot, I would love to hear your perspective first in terms of what it's been like for you to teach in the online MBA program.
Absolutely, I would love to. Okay, so I designed the leadership course and then have taught it a few times as well. The design process was much more intensive, but it was really fascinating to be involved in. What is notable to me is it is structured differently than many other classes, like you mentioned before. So for one thing, that I think that's like the starting point of this conversation, to talk about the structure of the class. One, it's not just a bunch like you go in and get lectured at. Rather, it's broken into both asynchronous and synchronous sections. And this asynchronous material each week consists of videos, activities, readings, and that gets to the first benefit of this format, in my opinion, because you can do all of that. You can do half the work whenever you have time, right? So when on your lunch breaks, once your kids are asleep, whenever it works for you, or even in like sort of bite-sized pieces. These videos are rarely that long. They're not an hour long at a time. They're directly, they've been managed down to I would say nearly bite-sized chunks, so that you can fit it into your schedule. But the other side of that as well is, and I might be an academic, but like many academics, I struggle to focus sometimes when someone's even talking too long. So you don't have to worry about the professor just simply lecturing, or you getting distracted, or you forgetting to take notes or anything like that, because it's just there. You can just rewind. I honestly, that was like, as I was thinking about this class and designing it and what that meant, that was the thing I felt most jealous about, to like from my own academic experiences. Like, wow, the number of times I zoned out, I stopped paying attention to class. And if I could have just rewinded the lecture or the whatever, that would have been incredible. So that's one thing. I think that asynchronous part is, and the amount of control and autonomy you have over that is phenomenal. The other thing is, there's the other 2 hours you have per week is the synchronous time together, which is similar to a normal class. However, the reason why I mentioned that other thing first is because what that means is the lecture is already done, right? You come to class, in a sense, already having the lecture component of the class taken care of, which means that as a professor, you don't have to lecture, which is, I love that. I hate lecturing. But it also means for students, we can do things that are just so much more enriching and so much more interesting than a lecture. So it's the time in my class, at least, is almost exclusively dedicated to questions, discussion, interaction, activities. It's all dynamic in that way. I literally don't have any lecture in my synchronous sections, like zero lecture. So we did spend that time getting deeper into the material. So I love that, because and I can trust that the students have that base of knowledge we need to get deeper in, because they've done those activities, the videos. So again, those were all things that, as I designed, I personally was jealous of for my own training. And then I think that, like, as a final kind of thought, like a much bigger picture in terms of some of the benefits, but also just things that the impact of this style, or this structure, is that and one of my favorite aspects of this whole thing is that it provides opportunities for people who might not otherwise have them. And that was something that struck me. I did not even think about this at all when I was creating the class. But then as soon as, like, on my first day of teaching, it was immediately obvious that I had students from all over. And that was incredible, right? And I realized very quickly that not everyone can move to Mexico City, right? Not everyone can move to Monterrey, right? Some people have families or jobs that, like, anchor them in the community. And in my opinion, that's good. I don't want to unroot those people to take them away from that context. I want them to stay there, which is good for them. But then still have access to these other opportunities. So, and even if you live in Mexico City, maybe you just don't want to deal with the traffic in Santa Fe. That's completely understandable as well. So in the end, I had students from all over Latin America, but all over, I had students in the United States, just from everywhere. It was really phenomenal. And you had mentioned, you get people from different industries in engineering, but you get people from, like, all kinds of industries in general, like real estate and et cetera. And I think that as well is deeply enriching, because you see how people do it in different worlds, right? In different professions, and how they solve problems or fail to solve problems. I think all of that is really, really, really great. So that being able to cast such an incredibly broad net to both connect people to opportunities and connect people in the classroom, I really love that aspect.
I love all those points you brought up, and especially with the fatigue, in terms of, we all have that time where you're sitting for a very long lecture hall and your brain just kind of goes out, especially if you've been working all day, you're in a leadership position, you're, have family, all these other competing things going on in your brain, in your mental space. And with our online program, we also have a mobile app. So if you are tired of sitting in front of your computer all day and you want to actually watch the lectures or something as you're moving about your home and doing your life, that's even another layer that our program offers in terms of the flexibility. Not something for the live class sessions itself, but that asynchronous content gives you a bit more mobility. So Fernando, I'd love to hear your perspective on this in terms of moving to teaching in the digital format. What has been the impact? What have you seen with your students? What has your experience been?
I will say, and what I'm going to say is not because we do not live in the regular live sessions, but at least when you have a digital structured program like this one, you have the opportunity to make a more accurate storytelling. So in my case, I designed the digital transformation course, and I decided to do in a business perspective. And why? Because at the end of the day, we are not going to train in a specific tool as VR or blockchain or something like that, but how to understand, how to interpret, and especially how to analyze the story in the business. Because, for example, digital transformation has several years. It is not nothing new. What is new is that we have an exponential new technologies. So I will say that having this opportunity to be sure about the storytelling that we are, as teachers, that we are sharing with the students, it will be very easy for them to track why we are saying X or Y, and why we are doing it in the specific, I will say, order. So sometimes when we are in a living session, maybe the structure could be not well understood by everybody, because you are not emphasizing it. But in the platform, you will see that it's very easy to see the programs about what's going on and that kind of issues. But in the other hand, I will say that considering the synchronous sessions, the students will have the opportunity to go deeper. So that's something that we do not have the chance in a regular class because of the time. And in this case, in this time or in this kind of program, as Elliot mentioned, it will be very easy to have the opportunity, because we are not going to have lectures in the synchronous live sessions, to go deeper. And that's is the way that, in my point of view, the knowledge is coming to everybody. Is a kind of interaction that will provide very important benefits to everybody, because they will have the opportunity not just to learn from the teacher in this case, but also to make their own, I would say, interpretations, but the research, because we also have some additional material, and mainly, at least in my point of view, what the other students participate. So I will say that this kind of enrichment that is sadly in a regular class, we do not have because the timing. In this kind of format, we have the opportunity to emphasize in that way.
Thank you for that perspective, Fernando. What you said really did, as you mentioned, echo what Elliot said in terms of you have your asynchronous material that you're able to prepare. And I love that you explained it in such an engineering way of creating a structure and a set of processes to follow that is very kind of more linear for students. And then in the live class session, you're able to go in and really break that apart and dig into the material. That's interesting. It's something both of you have mentioned, just the level of interaction, because that's a question we get constantly from people asking about the program is, what is the actual kind of interaction that you're having with faculty members? I think it's hard for people to conceptualize how you are digging into these topics on such a deeper level, because they've already had that time to do that initial review of your subjects that you're teaching.
That's right.
So speaking of the platform, and just to educate a little bit further on how it works, this is kind of what we've been talking about, but this is meant for full-time working professionals. You're going to discuss the subjects with your professors in real time, as we've been talking about, and oftentimes utilizing small group breakouts. So I would love to hear from either of you if you utilize breakout groups in your classrooms and really how that works. So Fernando or Elliot, if either of you have used breakout groups, could you talk us through that experience a little bit?
Fernando, you can go for it. Why don't you start?
Okay, thanks. Well, with this, with the COVID-19 pandemic that we are living right now, many of the program or the programs that we have in the school, we moved to the digital solution because of this situation, and we had the opportunity to interact with our regular students in this kind of breakout rooms. And for sure, this kind of process, or I would say, this kind of different activity is going to be done for sure in the MBA online, and it's going to happen right now. In my particular case, the program that I prepare about digital transformation is going to be scheduled, I will say, next year. But for sure, there are some programs or some subjects that already were developed. And in my experience with these groups, is a kind of, to a pause in the rhythm of the class, and it provides the opportunity to the students to share between them. I used to develop them not in a structured team, but I want that people from different teams, because in the class we split the people in teams to make activities, projects, etc. But specifically for these activities that happen during the class time, I used to work with them trying to make it in a random way. So the different perspectives that they have it's really enriching to the class. The only disadvantage that we have with this kind of, I would say, technique is that in my case as a teacher, I couldn't be in all the breakout rooms at the same time. But for sure, when you enter and you see the discussion that is happening, most of the times it's really productive. And for sure, the outcome that they provided, it helps to improve the total picture that we want in a specific topic that we have on debate.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And Elliot?
Yes, absolutely. I use breakout rooms constantly. I love them. I think that it's a great way to start a conversation. My classes are often structured around questions. So for example, the very first class of my leadership course is about power and politics. And the very first question I pose to the class is, does power corrupt? And so then I can use breakout rooms to start off the conversation by putting them in these smaller sections where they can bounce ideas off each other. They can get thinking about this thing before I bring them all back together as a class and discuss it together. And I think that's a fantastic way to sort of warm people up to the conversation. And if they have any ideas that they're unsure about, or you know, they haven't really thought about this thing as much, they don't have to feel as self-conscious, you know, about saying their idea in front of the whole class. They just pitch it to a small group. And we might spend like, 10 minutes in those small groups and come back. And I do several of those oftentimes as we go. Anytime that there is a bigger question, I'll do that. And then plus there's oftentimes activities. So I use them for example, one of the units in that leadership class is on negotiation. And so then in that, they do a negotiation activity, a simulation. And so it's very easy to use the breakout rooms for that. I just drop 2 people into a breakout room and they negotiate the case and come back, which is, in contrast to classroom settings, that is always the most frustrating part of those activities. People have to leave the class, find somewhere to negotiate at the front, make sure I know where they are. And it's logistically, it's a whole thing. So I can, it really facilitates a lot of classroom interactions.
I love that perspective. And just to further explain breakout groups, if the concept isn't really clear to anybody listening, normally in a classroom setting, our faculty members could say, okay, turn and work with the people next to you or the person next to you, as Elliot was saying, go and find a different room to discuss negotiation topics. And there's actually a way to do in the online classroom where the faculty members will split individuals off into separate groups. That can be, normally there's no more than about 20 people in a classroom, breaking that into, as Elliot mentioned, either 2 people, or Fernando may have, let's say, 5 people in a group. And for a set amount of time, you're able to discuss more intimately and then come back into the larger classroom to discuss as a bigger group. So it's a fantastic tool that our faculty members have to use. Something else is, Elliot said, class recordings. It's not just the asynchronous content that is recorded. The class sessions themselves are also recorded. That does not mean you don't have to show up live to class. You do, but it means that you can go back and really dive into concepts again, review it as many different times as you want. We also have 24/7 technical support. So if you're having any issues with the platform in particular, you can contact our technical support teams and they'll be able to assist you. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and dive into the Q&A section. So go ahead and type in any questions that you may have into the chat and we'll take a look at those. I will tell you one question that we get constantly, and I would love to hear from you both on, is what kind of assignments are they doing in your classes? So are there group projects? Is it just tests? Is it papers that they're writing? If you could just give us a peek in terms of what you're delivering in your classes in terms of assignments, love to hear from you. So Fernando, would you like to start us off with that one?
Sure. Well, for sure, there are component that is individual and some component by teams. And at least in the digital transformation class, what I want is that, encourage to the students to think outside the box, not just to work in the way that, provide some correct or answers about the specific cases. So it's more like understanding the ecosystem that is around you, because at least what I used to see is that people, live in a very rushed manner and sometimes do not have time to say, okay, let's take a minute and analyze what we are using. If, for example, could be a platform, a website platform, could be a new technology device, even why not trends that maybe everybody talk about it, but nobody understand. That sometimes happen. So those kind of analyze, try to match with what the companies, the leading companies are doing. That's the kind of activities that I try to encourage to the students to analyze in a deep manner. Cases of study for sure, and sometimes are very related to try to think outside the box. For example, for me, at least the way that I see digital transformation is not about technology, it's about strategy. So I see everything focused in the strategic way, because, technology is changing all the time. You need to understand, you need to apply some of those trends, but the worst that you are going to do is to marry with a specific technology, because it will be expensive and you will be out of the I will say, the improvement in a very few time. So that's important to see the strategic component about what you are going to do in your organization, no matter if it's small, if it is big, and the cost and how you are going to encourage those kind of different skills that you have as manager, or every position that you have. This could help to everybody, no matter the size of the company. And sometimes the best way to see an accurate decision is how to approach the problem. So sometimes we make the mistake to define the problem in a very quick, I will say, time with a few elements. And at the end of the day, it could be a problem, because the most of the solution is how you analyze the problem. So those kind of activities, for sure, for me, it is important, the individual part, because it provides you the opportunity to analyze by yourself how you see this kind of challenge. But the teamwork is very well accepted. I just want to mention that in the sessions, I try to encourage the team to do the teamwork activities during the class, because this kind of format that is online, it's complicated when you ask a lot of I would say homework or something like that needs to be by teams. So it sometimes could happen, but that kind of interaction in breakout rooms in the same time of the class is more than welcome.
That's really interesting to hear that you're incorporating it into your live class sessions, so the students, when they're doing team projects, have the opportunity to get it done without needing to schedule so much extra time on their own together. And I love that you put the point of not just jumping straight to the tactic to solve a problem, but redirecting your students to actually think about the strategy. I want to take your class. So
Thank you.
Elliot, I would love to hear for you the same question. What kinds of assignments or things are students doing in your class?
Absolutely. Okay, so I actually struggled at first thinking about this question, because I don't do that many assignments. I try not, much like Fernando, I try not to do too much like classic homework. I don't really believe in that too much, or I don't believe it adds that much more value beyond what students are already doing with the asynchronous videos and those activities. That's, in my opinion, sort of enough homework outside of the class. Now, of course, there's readings and some basic stuff like that. the biggest assignment that I have them do is something I call a leadership journal, which basically has them think critically about leadership experiences that they either are involved in or they witness or things like that. And it's funny because it sounds like, honestly, whenever I get feedback from my students, that's the thing one of the things they most love, because it gives them time to think about like why they want to be a leader and what the kind of leader they want to be, which I've discovered that many people don't feel like they've had the time to seriously think about, right? They know that they need to be a leader in order to get paid better or to like advance their career or something like that, right? But thinking about it more broadly or more personally, then is, I really love making space for those questions and time for those questions in that class. The other thing, so then the question more is, what are the kinds of activities that we do in the synchronous session? Because much like Fernando, I try to include it more when we're together. And it really, of course, it depends on the topic. So the leadership class is it's sort of a buffet of different units and topics. I try to like cover a wide range of things to give a sampler platter of different ideas. But I mentioned in the negotiation class, they do an actual negotiation, which is really great. And there's a unit on storytelling and like leadership storytelling. But with that one, they have to actually write out, in a sense, their personal narrative, something about a challenging part of their life or something that they're facing, and then work on rewriting it. And thinking about the structure of the story and implications of the story, the context, and thinking about how they can not like do something necessarily, but how they can think about the story in a different way to rewrite it. So things like that, which again, students often report they really, really enjoy, because it forces a different perspective that at times they don't always have the resources or the energy to do. I'm trying to think of another one is, we do this activity about ethical challenges. So one of the things I'm very interested in that class is what students do when they are put into morally hard situations, right? When, for example, your boss expects you to do something that's unethical or even illegal, what do you do, right? And that, so one of the things we do is we start by brainstorming scenarios that the students are, personally care about, right? And some of it can be very challenging situations. Like maybe they witnessed a boss be inappropriate towards a coworker in some way, right? And so then how do you go about speaking up, or who do you speak to, or just what you need to do? I'm not really doing the activity justice right now, because there's actually several steps and it's a whole integrated unit. But the point being that we tackle those issues deeply, in my opinion, and try to address things that are genuinely difficult to answer.
Wow, that is really interesting in terms of the types of activities, and I want to start a leadership journal right now. So
great.
I want to be conscious of both of your time. In the last few minutes we have here, I would just love to hear if there's any kind of parting words that either of you have in terms of advice for students in terms of how to be successful in your classes. A lot of times I think going into an MBA program is often a mental battle, whether you're coming from an engineering background and this is going to be you pushing yourself into doing something that's kind of out of your normal day-to-day, to most of our students have 10 plus years of work experience, they're coming back to school. So anything that you really like to share with students in terms of your philosophy or advice, would love to hear that. So Elliot, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. I'll need a moment. I think, so advice, I think the first thing is, if I can speak plainly, I have noticed that at times some students, I remember in the very first session, not everyone did make time for the asynchronous material. And I think at times they didn't fully understand what that meant, right? The program was still very new, and I think that students are still kind of learning the expectations. And I think that's changed now. I think it's much more clearly stated. But if I can give one very practical piece of advice, it would be to actually do the asynchronous stuff. Like that's not sort of optional, because not out of any sense of, you know, you need to do your homework, but in the sense that what you get out of the synchronous classes is multiplied by the work you put into the asynchronous stuff. It's because almost always it builds on each other, right? Like my asynchronous stuff, or sorry, my synchronous material, the stuff in the actual live classroom, almost all of it builds on what they've already hopefully been seeing and thinking about and doing. So just purely for the benefit, the enrichment, they don't skip that stuff. It's in my opinion essential. I think that, and be willing to have hard conversations, you know what I mean, about leadership and what you really want, and because once you get into a leadership position and you're doing management, you will have to make hard decisions and be involved in very difficult conversations. So this is your time to practice that, right? This is your time. So as an example of this, in my with the negotiation, there are times actually when students feel frustrated because they didn't do very well, or they even feel angry because their counterpart lied to them, right? And honestly, as a professor, I'm not going to tell you that the other person shouldn't have lied to you, and they ethically they shouldn't. However, the benefit of this class is you can learn how to deal with your feelings when something like that happens, and that to me is immensely valuable, because you will have to deal with situations like that. And now in those classes where it's safe to do so, that's the time to practice those things, practice those emotional skills, or confront aspects of yourself that are challenging. So that would be the thing. Keep an open mind and be willing to have like challenging conversations.
Wow, I think that's fantastic. Really great advice. Fernando, what about you? Is there any parting words that you would like to share with potential students, anything from your classes or how to be successful?
Yeah, sure. I will tell you my personal experience as engineer when I started to study the MBA. For sure, at that time, it was not online, but as Elliot mentioned, shame of us, because it will be an amazing experience, but never is late. So, but just come back on the time, I will say that changed completely my mindset. I had a very, I would say, linear idea about how to develop my personal career, my professional career. But when I started to study the MBA, it changed completely. So, and for good. At the end of the day, I had the opportunity to specialize my profile in other skills different than engineer. And for sure, it was a great base for me. It was a great platform, but I had the opportunity to discover different fields that nowadays I'm a kind of expert, for example, marketing or even digital transformation. And what I want to say with this is be open to change your mindset and to analyze different ways to encourage your personal and professional profile, because you will discover that maybe you have other desires or even other opportunities to develop. So the outcome of this program is not just to try to go one step in your organization or to find a job, but how you are going to be a better human being and a better professional that at the end of the day will give you the opportunity for sure to make your goals and go beyond that. So that's the idea. Is a kind of a starting point with all that you have, plus what you are going to learn in this program.
That is a fantastic point of, you had a linear path with a very engineering perspective. MBA can blow open your mind and introduce you to all different kinds of concepts through your interaction with your faculty members, your interaction with the other classmates. And then when you get towards the end of your program, the more than 20,000 alumni that we have worldwide. So fantastic. Thank you so much to you both for sharing your expertise, your perspectives. It was amazing to hear from both of you and extremely interesting. I know it's very helpful for the prospective students for the online MBA program. So Fernando, thank you so much for your time. Elliot, thank you so much for your time. And it was fantastic to have you both here this evening.
Thank you so much, Morgan, for having us. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Hope you have a great rest of your evening and stay safe.
Have a great night.
Thank you all.
Bye.